Well, hello, friends. My name is Matt, and I'm the youth and family pastor here at Cornerstone Church in Marshfield. And I'm here today with your Cornerstone Connection, a daily devotional. So, maybe like you, I've read through the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, that tell the story and life of Jesus from four different accounts, different lenses, you could say. I've read them several times over, and it never ceases to amaze me that every time I read about Jesus' life, and in reading about his life, I am observing things right in his ministry and life that he did, much like you do. But it never ceases to amaze me that there are things Jesus did that I just scratch my head and I go, wait, what? Why, Jesus? Why? Why did you do it that way? Or why did you say that? Or all these kind of questions that are just come out of me as I read these stories. And today was no different as I'm going through the Gospel of Mark right now in the New Testament. In chapter 7, I come across this story, and there's just a bunch of interesting stories in Mark. But this one about him healing a deaf and mute man, it starts in verse 31 in chapter 7. I'm going to read through verse 35. Just listen in here as I read. It says, Then Jesus left the vicinity of Tyre and went through Sidon, down to the Sea of Galilee and into the region of the Decapolis. There some people brought to him a man who was deaf and could hardly talk, and they begged him to place his hand on the man. After he took him aside, away from the crowd, Jesus put his fingers into the man's ears. Then he spit and touched the man's tongue. He looked up to heaven and with a deep sigh said, Ephatha, Ephatha, which means be opened. At this the man's ears were opened, his tongue was loosened, and he began to speak plainly. Now, when I read about this story, I mean, it's amazing, of course, in the fact that this guy could barely talk, he couldn't hear, and Jesus healed him. That's amazing in and of itself. But I have two big whys when I read this account. My number one why is Jesus, why did you have to stick your fingers in his ears and spit and touch this man's tongue? That's question number one. That just kind of sounds weird because Jesus, we see you do miraculous things without having to touch anybody. And I understand that people came to you, Jesus, and they said, hey, would you place your hands on him? But you went above and beyond that. You stuck your fingers in his ears and you spit on perhaps your hands and touched his tongue, or however that looked. We're not exactly sure, but why, Jesus? The other why question I have is, Jesus, why does it tell us in verse 33 that you took him aside, away from the crowd? And we can have all kinds of guesses at the answers to these questions of why Jesus did these two things. Did he not want the attention from the crowd? We see in the surrounding text that he wanted to be kind of kept secret. He didn't want people telling a lot about him, even though they kept doing it anyway, right? We see all of that. We can make some guesses at the answers of why Jesus did these things. But as I read this, I got to thinking, here's the one thing that we can bank on. We can bank on what Jesus tells us in John chapter 5, verses 19 and 20. Whenever we see Jesus do something that we just kind of raise our eyebrow, we scratch our head, and we go, Jesus, why'd you do that? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. I'm comforted and I'm just, helped out by what Jesus says in chapter 5, verse 19 and 20 in the Gospel of John. He says, Jesus gave them this answer. I tell you the truth, the Son, that's him, can do nothing by himself. He can do only what he sees his Father doing, because whatever the Father does, the Son also does. For the Father loves the Son and shows him all he does. Yes, to your amazement, he will show him even greater things than these. You see, Jesus only did what he saw his Father doing. He was completely, without missing the mark, completely, perfectly following the will of God. He was simply following where he saw his Father at work. And perhaps that meant pulling a guy aside from the crowd, sticking fingers in his ears and spitting and touching his tongue and seeing him be able to hear and speak again. Here's the point. If Jesus was willing to follow his Father wherever his Father was at work, shouldn't we too? That's our challenge today, friends. Go in peace, go in grace, and follow where you see the Father at work. Have a great day. We'll see you next time on the Cornerstone Connection.